So the next part to talk about with trig functions are the graphs. We're going to look at three main graphs that you want to kind of have an idea about what they look like. So firstly, go back to our unit circle. In our unit circle, let's think about what's the largest that sine could be. So sine is my y-coordinate. So in my unit circle, I can see that sine starts at 0 whenever my angle is 0. It goes to 1/2, goes to 1/2, keeps going up until it gets to 1. Then what happens? Then the y-coordinate starts going down, back to 0. Then it becomes negative, down to -1. Then it starts going up to 0, and then it repeats. So again, we're looking at the y-coordinate on our unit circle. Starts at 0, increases to 1, decreases to 0, decreases more to -1, increases back to 0. So the largest possible value is going to be 1. The smallest possible value is going to be -1. So if we go back here and try to draw a graph of sine, here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. I know that sine of 0 is 0, so it's going to go through the origin. Let's look back at this again. Where is this going to be 0 again? Well, the next time that the y-coordinate 0 is at pi, also at -pi. And then where does it become 0 the next time? At 2pi, also -2pi. I could also keep going, so I could go 2pi around and then pi more. So I could go 2pi, pi more gives me 3pi, or -3pi. Now, when is this going to be equal to 1? So we know that the highest value is 1, the lowest value is -1. So the highest it's going to be at 1 is whenever I'm looking at pi over 2. So I'll be 1 there. And then when I come down here to 3pi over 2, I'll be at -1. So if we connect this, we can see our graph is kind of repeating. And it's doing the same thing over here. So this is this graph of sine. Goes through the origin. Every 2pi it repeats. Every pi it goes through the x-axis. It goes between 1 and -1, back and forth. Now let's look at cosine. So again, I'm going to have things happening at pi over 2, pi, 3pi over 2, 2pi, and then out here at 3pi, and then also in the negative direction, so I can have -pi, -2pi, -3pi, etc. It's also going to go between -1 and 1. The x-coordinates, though, if we look at our unit circle, the x-coordinate starts out at 1, decreases to 0, decreases to -1, increases back to 0, then goes back up to 1. So this one's going to start at 1, then it's going to decrease. So let's see, I'm going to decrease until I get to -1, and that's at pi. And I know that at pi over 2, I'm going through 0, so it'll be kind of this. Then I'm going to go back up, and then start repeating. And I do the same thing on this other side. So that would be the sine, or the graph of cosine of theta, or cosine of x, I should say, not theta, since we're using x as our variable. And then lastly, let's look at the graph of tangent. Okay, so the graph of tangent, if you remember, tangent is sine divided by cosine. So every time cosine is 0, tangent's going to be undefined. So let's look at our graph up here. When is cosine 0? Cosine is 0 at pi over 2. It's 0 at pi. Sorry, 3 pi over 2. It's also 0 at negative pi over 2 and at negative 3 pi over 2. So every time cosine is 0, my graph is going to be undefined. You can't divide by 0. Now when does my graph go through the x-axis? That's going to be whenever sine is 0. Again, this is because tangent of theta is sine theta over cosine theta. So every time sine is 0, I'm going to go through the x-axis. So this will be at pi, at 0, 2 pi, and then you can see this is going to be for the negative 2. So if I kind of draw this graph, let's do it maybe to the right of 0 a little bit, I'm going to get something positive divided by something that's getting smaller and smaller, so it's going to go off towards infinity. And on the other side of that, I'll go down towards negative infinity. And then each little section does that. So this is the graph of tangent. Curve this out a little bit more here. You can see I have all these vertical asymptotes whenever cosine is equal to 0, and then every time sine was equal to 0 is where it goes through the x-axis. So these are the three graphs that you're going to want to know. Sine goes to the origin, bounces back between 1 and negative 1 with the period of 2, so it repeats every 2 pi. Period of 2 pi. And then cosine bounces back and forth between 1 and negative 1, but it goes through the point 0, 1, and then repeats every 2 pi. So, and tangent we already talked about. So those are the three graphs you're going to want to be familiar with.